Welcome to the Games Growth Podcast. Today's episode is an interview with Frank Cheng, co-founder of Apeiron. Frank is a really interesting guy. Apeiron is a really interesting project. They started as a mobile Web2 company, spent a lot of time in development, developing really unique gameplay loops. Now they've really gone all in on the Web3 game mechanics and have found a really interesting way to hybrid the economies. He's a deep thinker and has been at this for a long time, so really enjoyed the conversation. Ex-McKinsey as well as private equity. So he's quite a broad spectrum of experience. Warren, what did you think?
Yeah, this was my first time meeting Frank. I really enjoyed the conversation with him. Super thoughtful leader. He's very clear-eyed about where the games industry is at, where Web3 gaming is at, which parts of this are transactional, which parts of this are done for hype and promotion and for raising the investment round versus which things are driving fun and which things are driving value. And I think a lot of founders out there either fool themselves or try to fool the people around them, conflating these things. So I think Apeiron is a project that I'm definitely going to be playing more and keeping a closer eye on following this interview. I think great leader. Our listeners, I think, will learn a lot about what it means to pivot a game in long development into Web3, how to do that successfully, how to find the right partners for launching, how to build your first cohort of players, and what that journey might look like going into the next stage of Apeiron of trying to transition from this core Web3 audience they have today to a more mainstream audience. So I think it's going to be a high value episode. Frank is super bright and I think people will enjoy it. The podcast today is brought to you by our team here at Uptick. At Uptick, we do all things to help games grow. We provide the workforce and we provide the tech. This is across creative, traditional user acquisition, Web3 native marketing, and everything in between to make your game grow with the right players and hopefully in a profitable and sustainable way. That's what we strive for. So if you are building a cool game and need a workforce and the tech to help scale that to millions and millions of users, reach out to us at our website. It's uptick.com. That's upptic.com.
Today's guest is Frank Cheng, who started his career as a consultant at McKinsey and at the private equity firm SAFE, which is a leading China-based firm. He's since left consulting to follow his dreams of building a new Web3 game studio where they're developing a game called Apeiron. Apeiron is a free-to-play Web3 game which blends roguelite and RTS game genres. Since December, the game has scaled from 8K daily active users to around 66K daily active users. Pretty substantial growth, very impressive. In March, Apeiron launched its core ecosystem token with APRS. And coming up in about the next week, on May 21st, you're launching the Anima token. So a lot of context. Welcome to the podcast, Frank.
Yeah, Frank, great to have you on. We've been watching Apeiron for a bit here. We just had recently on the podcast Kathleen Osgood to do a deep dive on Ronin and some of the games building on Ronin. And you guys are definitely building not just one of the coolest games on Ronin, but I think one of the most beautiful and exciting games at kind of this nexus of Web3 gaming and traditional gaming that we tend to focus on a lot here at Uptick. So really excited to learn more about the vision for Apeiron, some of the growth strategies that you've been using, and what the future might hold.
Oh, thank you for the compliment. I'll jump first to the vision of Apeiron. As you said, my experience actually wasn't in game development, but throughout my life, I've been gaming quite a lot and very competitively when I have time. But of course, as I entered the job markets, I didn't have much time, but I never really gave up on the gaming side. I still try to play games when I can, but that has always been my childhood dream to create my own game. That's why I took Programming 301 as one of my first courses in college, and I found out, wow, I hate debugging, and I'm probably not going to be a game programmer. So I went to the traditional financial route to build my resume and all, but I've always kept tabs on gaming, its development as it moved from console to PC to mobile and back to console. But the growth is staggering, and the people I meet is quite interesting throughout my private equity career. I found the right timing to set up my team and pursue my dream, so to speak. But back then, the mobile gaming market is already booming, and there's a lot of teams in Asia that is very competitive. So the only way for us to design a game is to create a very unique game instead of trying to copy or do some minor innovation, because that's what a lot of Asian teams are already doing. So going for something fully original is something that I really want to do. And it took some time for me to garner and find the right team to do it, because trying to innovate and create new games is more often not very risky. It takes a lot of time, talent, and resources. It's been quite a journey, and I've met really great talent along the way. And so Apeiron is actually that dream that we started. Of course, along the way, it took many prototypes, many trials, many testings, but from a Web2 mobile game all the way to a Web3 game, and now onto the Ronin chain, and finally launching, it's quite an incredible journey, together with all the fundraising that we had, and also the growth that we've seen after migrating to Ronin. The first 6 years seemed rather slow because of all the pre-production, but once we entered blockchain, fundraising, development, it's another world over here. It's fast, the iteration is crazy, but at the same time, it's also very rewarding, and you get to meet a much wider audience, which is what we really want to see, because Web3 really does open up some new and interesting distribution channels, but how we merge that with traditional mainstream adoption will be quite a challenge going forward.
It's sort of the classic trope of nothing, then all at once. It feels like has maybe been the journey so far. And, as we were talking about with Kathleen when she was on the podcast recently discussing Ronin, they've built a really unique value proposition for kind of taking games from like 0 to 1 very quickly, because they have one of the most active and engaged, called like bootstrapping communities in Web3 gaming right now. So I think it'll be fun today to dig both into that journey of 0 to 1, and then the phases beyond this to expand Apeiron to larger gaming audiences.
Certainly.
So just jumping right in, assume the audience knows nothing about Apeiron. Can you describe it to the uninitiated? What is the core game loop? What is the audience? Why should people care about it? 10,000 foot view.
Well, there are actually 2 core game loops. The first one you guys will experience is actually the battle system, which is out right now. The core economy and game loop of Apeiron is actually sort of similar to Clash Royale or Marvel Snap, a mixture. And it's going to be a 1v1 online battle arena right now, where players will use their characters and pets to battle each other. Winner gets crypto tokens, and you can continue to grow and nurture your pilots as you play the game. The gameplay of Apeiron is quite new. It's a mixture of a lot of different things: action, RPG, a little bit of auto chess, a card game base, which a lot of it will seem rather familiar if you play a lot of LOL or a lot of Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering, or even some Hades roguelite. So it's a combination of a lot of things jam-packed into quite a chaotic but in-depth battle that really has a lot of our current ex-LOL champions and esports players going at it. That's rather fun. And the core economic loop here is the win to earn that we're trying to create, so that we encourage people to battle and then win in order to earn tokens. And using those tokens, we want to inherit and evolve the Axis token breeding system, which is where our main economy loop is. We think breeding and NFTs, using tokens to breed, is actually very powerful, as exhibited by Axie, and we want to evolve upon it to improve upon the supply and demand and the mechanics behind it. It's quite a giant system, an ecosystem that we've created. Hard for me to put it simply.
Sure. No, on that topic, Frank, I'm wondering, there's a long history to get to this point with Apeiron. Was it designed from the beginning with Web3 components in mind, or was that an evolution that occurred at some point in game development?
It's a really long evolution since 8 years ago, when we were trying to find the game, or when I was trying to devise a game that's unique. I actually dwelt back to God games. I play a lot of games. I would love to create my own MMORPG one day, but I know there are just too many competition out there, and it would be impossible for a green and indie team like us to do that. So I was trying to find some unique gameplay or genres that I miss, and God games was one of the first ones that I identified, because I play a lot of popular black and white and into Sims and also Spore, and I sort of miss those genres. They are rather complicated and hard to make, but I think with the advent of game development technologies and the advancement in platforms and tools, that would be possible. So when I first founded the team, we were trying to develop a God game. But because we need to develop it on mobile, the whole point of remaining competitive or having a decent monetization would be developing on the mobile platform because of the accessibility. To develop for mobile, we looked at monetization models. God game is a simulation game, which is good for acquisition, good for eyeballs, but for long-term growth, Back then, we think still PvP, arena play will be very important, so we integrated that whole battle system into the Scott game. This was a Web2 mobile game in the beginning. But as we garnered our team from 14 people to 30 people, we met a lot of different talents, and we saw the game development ecosystem to be more like a gig-based business, much like entertainment business, meaning teams come and go, and it's hard to maintain the strength of the core team and help them grow if we don't have a larger product, such as one that has potential to become an IP, story-based, franchise-based. So we also worked on a lot of story, trying to make sure that Apeiron have the potential to become animation, comics, merchandise would be a venue. So we started incorporating all these elements and worked all the way and began prototyping for 4 years before we locked the design we see nowadays. And finally came blockchain. Well, as an indie developer and with the growth of publishing, Facebook and Google Ads, these are very accessible tools that even indie developers can use. So we're always exploring if we can do our own publishing, at least in certain markets that we are confident in. And then my co-founder, who's actually the one with all the gaming experience, have always been in the forefront of technology. He's the first one to told us to look into blockchain in 2017. We sort of ignored him, thinking it's too early. And then it really pushed again in 2020, telling us to look, well, there's this game called Axie. It's very interesting, the economy, the ecosystem, and we looked into it, we played it. And we found, for us, if we want to find different go-to-market strategies, we want to find an interesting distribution platform, especially when we consider the viral factor to be so important in all gaming economies, and blockchain, the NFT ownership, the tokenized incentives is actually very powerful. And it would be very interesting if we move over there. And that's how we really studied Axie, and we found it to be incredible, the whole economy that they scratched upon. And so we tried to incorporate blockchain elements into our game, which took us half a year before we arrived at the model that we are very comfortable with. And then we began fundraising. And that just like Kickstarter on drugs. I've never seen money move this fast before. And the teams and everything just got together. The community started growing, and then the Luna happened. And then the bear market happened. But still, we got pretty lucky. So we raised a lot of funding right before Luna, and we used that to go into full production for 2 years. But then we've also had a lot of preparation beforehand, so we developed quite swimmingly along the way, and now we're ready.
You mentioned the progress you've made with the audience and sort of that explosive growth. Can we talk a little bit about what those top line numbers are? So we have the number 66K DAU that you've been throwing around. Can you talk about how you guys determine that? Is that actual active players in your game every day? And then what are some of the other top line metrics that you're looking at for your game today?
To be honest, I think there are two metrics that we should study as we look at blockchain game DAU. One of the main things that we did for the daily active users is the daily check-in system that we have on the marketplace.
Right.
So when it comes to Web3 gaming users, there's a lot of them that actually don't really like to dive too deep into games or spend too much time into gaming, especially mid-core games like Apeiron. But they do enjoy grinding and farming tokens and getting, maybe they would buy the assets, but they probably like to do tasks that are less demanding. So the daily check-in system is quite unique. It's quite essential in order to check on how many actually daily active users they are checking in upon our ecosystem. So that number is around 66K and up to 80K now and growing. But of course, as with everything blockchain, we must face that there are bots or multi-accounts trying to grind. Are there really that many gamers out there? I hope so, but skeptically, I doubt that. But still, it's an important number to keep the daily active numbers engaged. But if we look into our community, there is actually quite a lot of engagement and chats over there. The more important DAU that I would identify would be the actual in-game users who play daily. I highly doubt there are any number beyond 50,000 right now, to be honest, in the Web3 population. But I'd say in the in-game users, because we are right now, we would be a bit low because we're in between gaming seasons. But in the peak of the previous season, we had around 12,000 daily active users that are playing. The concurrent online users at max, or on average, where it would be around 500 to 600 users, which is actually quite good. According to our testings, the queue time was very, very fast. And then coming up next with the bigger Guild War and the announcements that we just posted a couple hours ago, the next season begins on May 21st. And also the second token, which is sort of like the SLP of Apeiron. We call it Anima. There's the daily winter token is live. We expect there'll be a much larger user growth coupled with $1 million in the final prize pool. I think it will be quite interesting to see where we're at. And this will be the final season before the official launch of the mobile game, the PvE, and the story mode. So quite a lot coming up.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty astute assessments on your part about the differences between when we think about like Web3 gaming as a space, there's very different profiles. Like there's people playing games, but as I think you said, it's still kind of a minority cross-section of those that are enthusiastic about Web3 and crypto, but also actively gaming every day, like for fun in these games. There are a lot of folks that are interested in Web3 gaming from a speculative standpoint, but they have very different behavior, as you said. And that's definitely something that we found to doing our growth marketing work with some of the chains that we support, some of the ecosystems, just very different definitions of even DAU. Like we think of DAU as a gamer, like having a gameplay session, whereas like for these ecosystems that are often funding the games, they're like, no, DAU is someone who did a daily wallet transaction. But these are like not very one-to-one because in the ideal gaming experience, we're not driving the user to do more wallet transactions than actually is relevant or adding value. So yeah, it's been very interesting working at this nexus of Web3 and gaming and just seeing like very different views of even just the same metrics defined.
There's a certain parallel between marketing strategies. You get all these users, you can still convert a portion of them, probably not a lot, much like traditional user funnels as you acquire, engage, install. So you can easily engage a lot of users in Web3, or at least a lot of wallets in Web3. How well a project actually manages to convert that comes down to pricing, liquidity mostly, and whether they really like your genre. But yes, it is actually quite a different user segment, which is also interesting because it's a new user segment. More often than not, it's actually a lot of them are old-time gamers or people who have more spending power but less free time on their hands, but still are interested in it. I think that's one of the reasons why GameFi or blockchain games get so much funding, because all the investors, they're people who play games. And so there's a certain passion and emotional attachment to games. And that's why I think games get so much funding. And of course, well, games, provided that they have quality and utility, can really showcase blockchain technology in the right way, not the speculative way. Still will take some time, but I believe we'll go there.
Awesome. I want to talk a little bit about how you think about audience and who your audience is. So it seems like, you've historically really targeted the Web3 audience. You have all these mechanics that you've built around the marketplace to make sure you're engaging these Web3 users. Interestingly, when I went to do some research around you, the first thing I did is just go to the Epic Store, download the game, and play the game without any Web3, without linking a wallet or anything. And to my surprise and pleasure, you can actually play the game. And I went and got stomped on my first PvP game without actually doing anything on the Web3 side. And so that's I don't want to say unique because it's happening more and more, but traditionally that has not been the case. You can just boot up and play a Web3 game without any friction on the front end. And so I want to talk a little bit about how you think about your audience. Is that an intentional strategy where you expect to expand to Web2 users and then bring them into the Web3 side? Or is it just you have a smooth onboarding to get a Web3 user? Or how do you think about the tension between those two audiences?
We started as a mobile game, a Web2 mobile game. And so our intention is free to play right off the bat. But of course, we are not supposed to throw you straight to the arena. That's actually a whole PvE dungeon and story mode where you learn skills and cards one by one before we throw you into the lion's cage. But right now, we're in a balancing phase, so we're focusing on that. The PvE actually is coming out in 10 days. Well, for our NFT holders to test, so hang in there. But we're still
try again.
The go-to-market strategy, I think, because distribution is still very important. And the king right now is still Google Play, iOS, Steam. These are the platforms that hold the majority of the mainstream markets, and we should work on the gameplay experiences that will help onboard these Web2 users. But more importantly, adhere to the standards, even compliance standards that these platforms have, which is why Web3 games are navigating rather unsteady water. But I think this is essential for games like Apeiron that's more mid-core and targeted towards mainstream. That's what we really want to do. The whole ecosystem, of course, have many components. There's tokens, NFTs, there's land that can accommodate different types of investors coming in here. But ultimately, our core audience must be our gamers, the users who play the game, enjoy the game, and don't necessarily have to spend a lot. That's why there's scholarship, there's rentals, there's a free-to-play, there's a battle pass mode that allows users to experience Apeiron in full, whether they pay or not, or become a Web3 user or not. But of course, we have delayed and later funnels where we can encourage them to try to make their first mints or become a scholar or become part of the community so that they can learn more about the benefits of owning NFTs or utilizing the tokens. But of course, this is absolutely not essential. Still trying to find a unique way to blend in, but I think once the game is launched, it will be more clear. And we have great mentors and predecessors like SkyMavis and Axie, who we constantly talk to and are very, very great partners that luckily don't require us to constantly reach them. They will actually actively reach out to us and help us with these problems, which is what I find one of the greatest things about Ronin. It's not just that they have this very active and supportive community. They actually have very experienced and passionate founders who really want to support their portfolio companies and partners on the chain to succeed. I think that's the main difference.
Yeah, that's a really good segue, Frank. I'd love to move next to games growth and just talk about the journey so far, the decision and the role of Ronin, the strategies used so far, and kind of where things go from here. So you just gave us some good context to the value that Ronin has had as a partner as you launch Apeiron. Maybe a little more context of like, what were the considerations that you guys had as a game developer on an ecosystem and chain partner? Why did Ronin make the most sense? And any advice that you have to other game developers that might be in the same situation. Right now, it seems like there's almost more L2s and chains than there are quality games. So I think it's a good place for game developers, and they're like almost like bidding wars between the different ecosystems. So any tips from your journey and your selection to work with Ronin?
For us, we actually always view the chain as sort of like the console which we're developing on. So some people have to develop on PS, on Xbox, on Nintendo. Selecting the chain is like selecting this console because this chain, usually a good one, have their own community. A lot of chains have a rather thriving community and they are very supportive of the things that go on them. So we want to find these chains and we view them as these console or even publishing partners in the beginning and not just a tech-based layer that we work on. We chose Polygon in the beginning for the ease of development. They have great front-end UI. But as we develop, we want more support from them, from a technology, from a marketing standpoint, as we were there, because Polygon is a rather large ecosystem. There are a lot more projects coming out. There's a lot of diversified and actually scarce communities scattered all around. How do we unite these users or approach them as essential? And the amount of support I got back then was very, very minimal to none, actually. So we were looking for another chain that can provide more dedicated support. It came to a decision between IMX and Ronin, both of which are great chains, I think. But because we want to target mobile users, we want to target Asian users, and we made the decision during the bear market. So we had to assume that the winter may be long, and we should identify users, crowds that are accustomed to our system, which is the token breeding, the card-based elements. That's actually the old Axie crowd. So there's that affected the decision. Of course, after meeting the Ronin team, it made a lot of difference. They were very picky. That's what I say about them. And I love picky people because I've fundraised a lot back in Web2, and I also pitched a lot in Web3. And you see investors being picky about valuation, about go-to-market strategies, but they're not very picky about the fundamental of the project, whether the team is strong, whether there's a product, whether the market positioning is right. Ronin does all that, and they dive even further deeper, which is good. I think this is how you identify good projects from scams. From then on, you realize that once you get past the due diligence, their team is really passionate in trying to actually help you. And they don't just have this giant community. This community is battle-tested, experienced. They've been through much of crypto's cycles, and then they survive the hacks, they survive everything. And so they're very supportive and everything. But more importantly is the management and the team up in SkyMavis. It's to show you randomly without you having to ask them. They naturally and organically will help you out And that's just incredible. That's just everything I want to find in a publisher. And provided that finally their experience and their track record, even if they got hacked, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I think it was a pretty straightforward choice for us to go with Ronin. But for many other projects out there, I think the final advice is finding the right chain means finding the right base community with which you want to go for. Ronin is a very game-dedicated chain, and they do look for quality games or games that are at least playable, and they review product positioning quite closely. So if you are not there yet, but you still want to find a chain partner, there are still many young and new chains out there that we're exploring. A lot of those chains actually don't have games yet, but let's say picking the right chain will be absolutely important. It cuts a lot of the community and the Twitter social media work.
Yeah, it is a very important choice. And one thing that I'll always advise teams, here at Uptick, we try to be very neutral. Our philosophy is like whatever is best for the game team. So, we work with multiple chains and ecosystems, Polygon, Immutable. We've supported SkyMeet and Axie before. And we try to stay very Swiss regardless of like who we specifically work with at any given time. But what I always tell teams is like, you need to make a choice of what's best for your situation, because often what I'll see in the ecosystem is the younger chains might be giving out bigger incentives to build with them, but they also provide less infrastructure or less direct support. So if your team is young and most values like the bag of cash or bag of tokens to fund the next stage of game development, then working with a younger chain that has not tapped those funds as much might be advantageous. Whereas if your game is more mature, a choice like Ronin, where there's like a ready-made player base that is accustomed, as you said, to jumping into games that speak a certain language, there can be like very high value in that. So I think that's another thing that I would recommend is just make sure you have multiple conversations, talk to people that have built on these different ecosystems, hear about the good and the bad experiences. Yeah, thank you for this insight.
Absolutely.
Right. So we talked about that journey, we'll call it the 0 to 1 journey of moving to Ronin, getting that very quick community of Ronin players that have already played other games in that ecosystem. I want to talk a little bit about the future of growth and how do you think about you're getting ready to launch PvE for the game and I think open up to a more mainstream player base in the months ahead. How do you think about preparing for that next stage of growth and what are the challenges and opportunities that you see in that? I know it's a broad question, but what does this next stage of growth look like for you?
Well, to cut straight to the chase, is getting onto Google Play and iOS.
Yeah.
The whole purpose of developing a mobile game ultimately is to get on those platforms. And the main challenge would be compliance issues or regulatory issues. What do we have to do in the game in order to be listed there? The exploration that we have right now is, of course, defining or diverse or separating the Web2 and Web3 path or gaming experience of a user. Of course, we will actually have to test it out before we can safely say it. I know there are certain regions that are easier, but the core regions where the main gamer users are US and China-based users are ultimately where the main gaming markets and most thriving markets will be. So we need to get into those markets, whether we need to partner with local publishers from Web2 or Web3 side. Actually, I feel Web3 gaming publishers as gaming guilds and chains. But the Web2 publishers, we will definitely partner up with them to help find a way to get Apeiron onto those main distribution platforms. Sadly, this is still essential because they are dominant. Hopefully one day these Web3 distribution platforms, questing platforms can one day also manage to navigate and succeed in acquiring more users. Then we will have more options there. But before that, we're still enslaved to traditional distribution platforms and we should adhere to their targets. That would be the main go-to-market, and anything else would be second tier.
Let's dig into that a little bit more. I share the same philosophy as you here, Frank. I talked to some Web3 game teams and they're like, oh, yeah, we don't want to give up a percentage of our revenue. We don't want to give up 30% of the revenue to Apple and Google. So we're just going to do, based on mobile web app or something like this.
Those guys must never have talked to centralized exchanges. They don't know. They have to understand there are things that people give up along the way here and there. But
yeah, exactly. So obviously Google and Apple are very intimidating large gatekeepers, but there's something quite meaningful behind that gate. Our stance is like the trust of a trusted platform for mainstream distribution. Like the games we support, we're not trying to get, 100,000 players. We're trying to get 50 million, 100 million players into these games. And you simply can't do that. I know for Apeiron, it's a bit more of a core game. And I say that kindly, as probably target demographic for it, growing up with a lot of the games that you mentioned. But for a lot of these games, it's you ultimately want a platform where someone's aunt or someone that has never made a wallet, that is not familiar with all of the jargon that we're tossing around can say, oh, that game looks fun. I have no concern about clicking download from this. I'm downloading it for free. I'm having fun. Now I'm ready to go deeper. So we will always advise teams. And, we worked actually very closely with the Axie team at the time that they were trying to get approved by Apple and Google, fostering some of those meetings, sitting down with Apple and Google to work through some of these early policy things. Because if you're going to be a leading game, there's a lot of these Web3 games that will sneak through. There's a lot of Web3 games on the App and Play Store right now that I think, honestly, Apple and Google don't even know are Web3 games. Just kind of sneak through approvals, which is one approach. But we always tell teams we work with this, guys, if we're trying to make a top 10 game here, we cannot sneak in. We need to make sure that we're doing things above board. And sometimes that means slower and more painful. But it seems like you have that same philosophy of you'll do it the hard way and the long way if it means that you can attain the largest possible audience for the game.
We did spend a lot of time into this, so might as well spend a little more to do it right and proper.
Yeah, absolutely.
We were quite confident in the core strength of the product, the graphics, the gameplay, the stories that will come. So we'll do the full mile.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I want to talk just briefly about the future in two parts. So one, you have some really major beats coming up. We talked about a little bit, the $1 million annual purse for your Guild Wars tournaments, as well as the launch of your token. Do you want to talk a little bit about that first? Then we can talk a little bit about what's the future of gaming at the end as sort of a pie in the sky final sign-off topic.
Sure. So yeah, we just announced a giant Guild War. It's a guild-based leaderboard where each guild or community will compete based on the top 3 ranked players in our leaderboard. The top ones will be invited to a giant tournament, a guild-based tournament that will be streamed online at the end of the season. The semifinals ultimately will end up in Hong Kong live, where we invite the top 4 teams from each region to compete in this giant game launch event that we will have probably around August or September. And it will be probably around a month or 2 after our official mobile game launch as well, where we will host this event. It will be quite exciting. The prize pool is giant. At least half of it, 500K, will be in USDC cash. The other 500K will be in NFTs and other tokens. So it's something that we really have. We've been doing it for 2 years in the past, in 2 preliminaries, both of which had over 200 communities joining. I hope a lot of them survived the bear. Yes, this is going to be the main thing that's leading to the launch. And of course, the second token, which is the game token, is coming out as well together with this new leaderboard on the 21st. So looking forward to see more gamers and people trying to play and earn daily. And then next is also the testing of the PvE dungeons and the story mode before we go for the official live. So yeah, coming up next, there's these launches, this tournament, and these testings leading to the official launch. I'd say latest around July. And then there's the main launch event. After the launch event, we'll probably do a big one in Tokyo Game Show as well. Going forward, we'll be targeting more Web2 game expos and events because that's where we hope to target our audiences. Beyond that, it would be the development of the IP and the franchise, where we go for YouTube shorts, animations, more merchandise, and collaborations in the space. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's a really well thought out and unique launch strategy. I think it's something that a lot of game teams can learn from, understanding how to basically create game beats that go along with the marketing beats to hit a launch date, which is, I think, a really, really clever integrated strategy. Okay, last question. Pie in the sky. If we look forward, I think you talked a little bit about how we have major gatekeepers in Steam and on iOS and Android. 1, 3, 5 years out, how do you see Web3 games evolving in their current place in the ecosystem? Do this become crossover? Is this mainstream? How do you think you see Web3 games developing in the next, call it 1, 3, 5 years?
Can't predict Web3 in 1 year, so it would be hard.
the good and the bad.
I actually feel not just Web3 games, but the entirety of Web3, in all honest truth, is that I don't think we will achieve mainstream adoption of Web3. But Web3 is something that will be staying and growing because I've never seen money move this fast. This is probably the best prototyping, fundraising, survival area for new projects or entrepreneurs to really try and survive and hit it big. I don't think any other fields will trump this. But will blockchain technology become massively adopted? I think it may be a middle segue or something along the way, or a part of the future mass adoption. But I hard to imagine that it would be there right now. But it's a very, very strong enabler. And I think blockchain games will evolve to a point that can utilize this technology, probably have the fear of the speculation and do more compliance in order to hit the mainstream. I think in the next 2 years, one of the main things happening is compliance. As you can see, a lot of centralized exchange are doing now. And so NFTs and games sooner or later will have to follow suit and cannot be avoided no matter where they are. And especially if they want to go for mainstream adoption, we still have to work with regional authorities and governments. So we'll have to do that. But how well we integrate that and what the legislations and rules will be like in the future, I have no idea. But if we can find that midway so that blockchain games can find better distribution platforms, or even have official distribution platforms that manage to rival Google iOS, can't imagine yet they would probably have to do even harder compliances. But if we do have that, that would mean a lot more games coming. I think ultimately, especially with the advent of AI, there will be more and more blockchain games, but I just have to be careful about quality about them. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, Frank, I really appreciate having you on the podcast. A lot of really interesting insight for our audience. If someone wants to get a hold of you or learn more about Apeiron, where can they do that?
They are free to find me on the Apeiron Discord. I dwell there most of the time. Just go to our Discord, tag Lorekeeper, and you'll probably see me.
Awesome. And yeah, for many of our listeners who might be hearing about Apeiron for the first time, I would encourage you guys to check it out, even if you are anti-Web3 gaming. I think it's really cool to see what a team does when they have the budget, the talent, and the time to really craft a game with care and try to apply some innovation and take from some of the learnings of old, but apply it with the new. And I think some of you might be pleasantly surprised to learn more about Apeiron. So thank you so much, Frank, for joining us today. It was really cool to learn more about your journey, the team's journey, and the future.
And thank you. I'll definitely talk to you guys separately. I would love to learn more about how you guys support the other, not just Axie, but also Blizzard and their games. I'm a huge Blizzard fan. If this is my office, you would have seen all my Blizzard products and toys behind my back. Yeah. But yeah, a pleasure. And looking forward to see you guys again.
Awesome. Talk soon.